Next step then is to look at plan, do, check, act cycle. So if we stop right here, nothing changes, right? What's the next step? To do some experiments. These little PDCA cycles. Plan, do, check, act. Toward the target condition. Again, looking at things linearly, we set our challenge, our vision, we understand that, we gathered our current condition, we just set the next target condition. Now we need to look at this. Here we are. We're going to utilize this step-by-step, iterative process, getting our way from the current condition to the target condition. So this is the step-by-step discovery process between where we are and where we want to be. So we're going to utilize these 5 questions in the conversation. Okay? We assume the path is unclear because we don't have to predict it, right? That's, again, the freeing paradox here is that we don't have to predict it all at once. We know that there's a gray zone. We know we're going to work our way through it iteratively and that it is going to manifest itself. So this is a setup for us to experiment at that threshold of knowledge, beyond which we don't know. The PDCA cycle, again, so sorry about this. I don't want to explain it, but it is what it is. So again, plan, do, check, act. Very important component. Step number 1 is to spend time to define what you expect to do and what you expect to happen. Got to get our head around that. That becomes a hypothesis against which we're going to benchmark the result. And then next step is to plan, do, test the hypothesis. For example, try to run the process according to plan. We think the operation should run according to standard work, and we kind of assume it, but when we go out and really look, we find something different. Step 3 is to check then, compare the actual outcome with what we expected. And step 4 is to where we want to keep things, standardize that. That's where the TWI component comes in, because as we change things, we need to capture that and standardize it. We need to stabilize what works. And then begin the next cycle of PDCA where we need to move forward. So by all means, as we ratchet up each step, that becomes standard work. So these steps constitute that scientific process of gathering, gaining, and acquiring knowledge. It gives us a practical means of attaining that target condition. It's how to work through that gray zone. Don't have to Kaizen everything, not Kaizen everywhere. We want to be selective, purpose-driven activity. So looking at a little closer, we've kind of all seen this, surprise, right? Surprise. Learning happens when reality differs from what we expect. And it's these unexpected results that lead to these valuable learning experiences. Again, we're pushing against entropy, trying to get away from status quo. The purpose of PDCA is to generate surprises and create opportunities for learning and progress toward the target condition. Okay? And sometimes we're going to fail, and that's okay. Sometimes we fail. And in doing so, well, it sets up the opportunity to learn even more.
You guys help me out here. Chemistry folks, maybe. I got 2 liquids. Yellow and blue. I'm going to mix them together. What's your hypothesis? They turn green, right? Mix them together, they turn green. What did I learn? It kind of confirmed my hypothesis, right? It really may not have learned a whole lot. Now I got my yellow and blue, I mix them together, they turn orange. Now what happens? My hypothesis was they turn green, they turn orange. That's when we kind of say, right? That's what we're starting to learn. If they're going to turn green, they turn orange, let me figure out why. Same thing with our coaching, right? As we do our experiments, we're going to do the hypothesis, we're going to have an expectation based on our understanding of the current condition. And it may confirm what happens, or if it doesn't, then that's our learning. That's when we begin to get stretched, when we begin to increase our knowledge, move that knowledge threshold. And that's what we're trying to do with COD. We're trying to develop our people by understanding where their knowledge threshold is and experiment past it.
If you kind of take that and look at the bullseye or the target thing here, the P of the PDCA is this expectation, this hypothesis. Put the go together, you expect that to happen. It's a hypothesis, right? The C is a reflection. What did we actually learn from this? And what do we need to do to adjust? So if it didn't come out the right color, we need to figure out why. So when a hypothesis, again, is refuted, this is a particular, gives us new insight, helps us to learn, improve, adapt, and innovate. And as we reflect and attempt to understand, we discover new insights. So because of these hypotheses, we have come to understand this threshold of knowledge. As coaches, really, really important we see where that spot is. Again, we won't make strides if we don't. Here it is again, that threshold of knowledge. It's like the person in the maze. You can only see so far. You don't have to be able to predict the entire route. As we get to this point, the next step will be lighted for us. So that's that point, the threshold of knowledge, where we don't have any data. We begin to start guessing. When we ask the learner, what do you think? And he or she says, I'm really not sure. I don't know. I think maybe. You're there. So again, predictable zone, safe, easy. Going beyond that, we get into the uncertainty zone, and we must cross into that zone in order to reach our target condition. The old way, we kind of did big Kaizen events, right? We did giant leaps upward. So this is our current condition. We did something and raised ourselves up to a Kaizen, to a target condition. These are the big PDCA cycles. They might be, we would check on things weekly. The improvement kata, though, is we check after every step. What did we learn? What happened there? We take these small iterative PDCA cycles. I think Taichi Ono said, every day a little up, some days big up, right? A little bit at a time. Go slow to grow fast. We want to check after each step again, take these small, frequent cycles. How often do you think we should do this if we got into this kind of a kata routine? Once a week, once a month, what do you think? Can you say daily? Yeah. How long does it take to develop a habit typically, where they say, how many days? 21 days. So if you do the same thing over and over, you get into a routine of expectation. We're trying to rewire those neurotransmitters and create new understanding of how we should operate. So if we are faithful and do it the same way every day for theoretically 21 days, it becomes a habit. And that's what we're trying to do here, a little bit every day. Each one of these steps up is, in fact, a small PDCA cycle. Real simple. And it may only take minutes. That's okay. We might decide in pursuit of a target condition to maybe move some of this work from here to here, right? We take that step, we look at it, find out it's not what we wanted, but we recognize something else. That, in fact, is a PDCA cycle. So we don't need to commiserate, deliberate, and all that. Just pick something and start. If we look at the 5 questions card, pull it out if you don't mind, just kind of look at begin to look at that card in front of your book, the first one on the left. We've got 5 questions, and just at a high level. We look at the first 2 questions. The first 2 questions are kind of at the macro level. We ask 2 questions basically. What's the target condition? And if Brandon and I are standing at the board here when you see our coaching cycle, I will ask him, Brandon, what's the target condition? He will read from the target condition. Doesn't have to make anything up. I would then ask him, okay, so what's your current condition now? Again, he would read from that data. So these first 2 questions are kind of the planning type questions. You get questions 4 and 5 then, 1 and 2 are the planning questions. Questions 4 and 5, we're drilling down a little bit more. We're asking, what's your next step? Okay? What do you expect is going to happen? Okay? And you'll see that we'll flip the card over here. We'll explain that here in a bit. But basically, we're just saying, when can we go and see what we've learned from taking that step? Interesting use of words. It's not when can we go see that you have accomplished what you said you're going to do. Instead, when can we go and see what we've learned from taking that step? What a wonderful freeing process this is for that learner to know that he or she is not under some kind of a imposed gun, if you will. The macro PDCA cycles form that context or the direction, but the micro comes from, or the learning comes from the micro PDCA cycles, a little bit every day. You got to do it anyway, right? It's kind of like the old Fram oil commercial. Pay me now, pay me later. If we don't do these kind of things, it's going to hit us sooner or later. So a little bit every day, bite-sized bunches is what we're looking at. This is the card. Again, the first 2 questions are kind of the macro framing questions. These others are kind of at the micro level. So if you're starting your very first cycle, you begin to ask, day 1, Brandon, what's the target condition? He'll tell me. What's your actual condition? He'll tell me. He hasn't done a PDCA cycle yet, so I won't flip the card over. Hold on to that for a second. I will ask him, based on your obstacles, what do you think, which one do you think is keeping us from achieving our target condition? He'll tell us which one. And so I'll ask him, what's your next experiment? And what do you think is going to happen? And when can we go and see what you've learned from taking that experiment? After he's done the experiment, I'll come back the next day, we'll have the same conversation. When I get to this point, we'll flip the card over, and I'll ask him, Brandon, what was your last step? In other words, what did you do yesterday? And what did you expect to happen? And then what actually happened? What did you learn? And then I'll flip it back over. Now then, remaining obstacles, which one do you think we should work on next? Et cetera, et cetera. And so it goes every day. This is a 15-minute conversation at the Kata storyboard. Afterward, the folks go out, they do what they have to make it happen. A little bit every day. Again, we ask the 5 questions at each step. We have the learner, the person who is responsible for the process. He or she interacts with the value adders and men and women on the factory floor, so he's like their representative. We're doing it with them, not to them. The coach is the person who helps keep that learner in this corridor of learning by utilizing the 5-question card. It's all scripted out, it's easy to do, it's predictable, it's no reason to be afraid of it. This is the card. If you kind of look at these PDCA cycles record form up here that we've got, it's where the learner will be responsible for keeping up the current condition information so that he or she can talk to the coach. And as they've done their PDCA cycles, they begin to put down here, what's the next step? What do we think will happen after the coaches, he or she and the coach have had their discussion? They go out and do the experiment. The learner then comes back and posts the result and describes what has been learned, and together they will begin to then determine the next step. And it will keep going until ultimately we reach our target condition. So again, the PDCA form is read left to right, 1 row at a time, each row being an experiment. Number 1, right? Number 2, the pattern of the form repeats. So before we get started, simply propose. That's the first step. Okay, here it goes. And what do we expect to happen? It's simple. After we again have the coaching cycle, agree that's what we're going to do, we go out and we do that, we post the result, what we learned, and come back and decide what the next step should be. Is it a lot of work? Is a lot of details? Like, oh, do we have to do this? What do you think? Yes. And eventually, after it becomes common sense or routine in nature, we get away from it. It becomes the way of life, right? So what we're being encouraged, what our author says in his book, is just as novices, as we can talk about the driving scale, just go ahead and follow the process. Again, TWI trainers, anybody done any TWI training or been through it? You know, the card is hard, isn't it, the training, but the beauty is in following that methodology. And so we trust that that same thing exists here. There are 3 kinds of experiments. The first one might be, let's just go and see. We think the process should be running this way, but you know what? Let's just go directly observe, collect some data, don't change anything, but just go see. The next level of sophistication might be, let's try an experiment. Do a little change in the process, which is what we're going to do here for the next round in a minute, and see how the process reacts. Right? I hope you understand that. So again, we might try to run the process as specified in the target condition. Let's just see if we can do that. And then the third thing is to really introduce a change, something that a little more power behind it. But ideally only a single factor. It's kind of like Six Sigma. You don't want to, in DOEs, we don't want to change too many variables at once. So we introduce a change together with the prediction and just, again, see what happens. What we're trying to do here is we're preventing operators, and we always ask this question, what is preventing the operators from being able to work in a stable condition, a stable cycle? And this perspective, if you will, keeps us focused on the process, on the work process. Fix the process before we start fixing people.